It was the night that should have ended like any other. A normal Friday, a normal bar, a normal celebration before a short break from medical school. But somewhere between the laughter, the loud music, the clinking glasses, and the crowd of strangers, something happened that no one has ever been able to explain. A young man walked into a bar, and never came out. And to this day, nearly 2 decades later, the question remains the same: where did Brian Shaffer go? Brian was a 27-year-old medical student at Ohio State University. Smart, ambitious, calm-natured, and deeply loved by everyone around him. But behind that steady smile, life had not been easy. Just weeks before his disappearance, Brian's mother passed away after a long fight with cancer. It was a devastating loss, one that affected him more than most people realized. But outwardly he tried to move forward. He kept attending classes, he kept studying, and he kept planning for the future, especially a future with his girlfriend, Alexis, who believed Brian might propose to her on an upcoming trip to Miami. On March 31, 2006, spring break was beginning. The atmosphere around campus was light, relaxed, almost festive. Brian finished his last exam and decided to start the break with a night out. First with his father, Randy, who remembers Brian looking exhausted but still holding that gentle smile. Then later with his friend, William, Clint, Florence, who invited Brian to spend the night bar hopping, unwinding, and just getting away from all the pressure for a few hours. It should have been harmless fun. But that night turned into one of the most baffling mysteries in modern American crime history. Around 9 p.m., Brian and Clint began their bar crawl, moving from one place to another, having a couple of drinks at each stop. The night was cold but energetic, the streets alive with students celebrating the beginning of spring break. Brian seemed a little quieter than usual, but still in good spirits. Nothing about him suggested he was planning to vanish, or that anything was wrong. No one sensed danger. No one predicted the nightmare that was coming. At around 1:15 a.m., they arrived at the Ugly Tuna Saluna, a bar on the second floor of a building in Columbus's Arena District. The moment they walked up the escalator, security cameras captured Brian smiling, talking, moving normally, just another guy entering a busy bar. But inside the bar, the night grew messier. Drinks kept flowing, music got louder, people came and went. At some point, Brian got separated from Clint. Maybe only for a few minutes. Maybe for longer. Exact details are still unclear. Phone reception inside the bar was poor. Noise was everywhere, and in that chaos, time passed faster than anyone expected. By closing time, Clint assumed Brian had left with someone else or gone home early. Clint and another acquaintance waited a bit, then walked out of the bar without him. Brian, however, never walked out. And that is where this story becomes a mystery that has haunted America for almost 20 years. At 1:55 a.m., Brian is seen on the bar's security camera talking to 2 young women. He seems relaxed, friendly, not in any distress. After a brief conversation, he waves goodbye and steps slightly out of frame, moving back toward the bar's interior. And from that moment on, Brian Shaffer is gone. There are no further camera recordings of him leaving. No footage of him on the escalator, in the hallway, on the street, or anywhere outside the bar. He simply disappears into thin air. The next morning, Alexis tried calling him repeatedly. It went straight to voicemail. She assumed he was sleeping. Hours passed. No response. Later, she drove to his apartment. Brian wasn't there. His bed was untouched. His car was still in the parking lot. Everything about the situation felt wrong. By Monday, Brian was officially reported missing. Police immediately reviewed Ugly Tuna's surveillance tapes, and found nothing. They rechecked every second of the footage. They slowed it down frame by frame. They analyzed reflections, shadows, angles. But the conclusion shocked even the investigators. The cameras caught Brian entering the bar, but never leaving. How is that possible? The building had limited exit routes. The main entrance had 2 cameras covering both angles, making it nearly impossible for someone to slip out unnoticed. The back exit was typically kept locked and used only by staff. Even if someone had used it, that alleyway was narrow, risky, and still close enough that someone might have seen him. Yet there was no sign of Brian anywhere. Police began searching the entire district. They questioned everyone who had been at the bar. They interviewed Clint, who insisted he had no idea where Brian had gone. They talked to the two women Brian spoke with, but none of them saw what happened after he moved back inside. Soon, the case grew stranger. Dogs followed Brian's scent from the bar's entrance area, but it suddenly vanished near the street. No direction, no continuation. The scent simply stopped. Search crews spent weeks combing through dumpsters, abandoned buildings, parking garages, and even the Olentangy River. Nothing turned up. Detectives searched hospitals, shelters, bus stations, airports, no trace of him. They checked local criminals, gang activity, drug connections, nothing. Brian had no financial activity after that night. No credit card usage, no phone calls, no social media, nothing. It was as if Brian Shaffer walked out of reality itself. As theories exploded online and in the media, investigators focused on a few possibilities. One theory suggests Brian stepped outside through a service door and met with foul play. But why would he use a staff exit? And if he did, why didn't cameras capture him approaching it? Another theory believes Brian voluntarily disappeared. He had been struggling emotionally after his mother's death. Perhaps he needed to escape, start over, run away from the overwhelming pressure. But no evidence supports this. He was planning a trip with Alexis. He was performing well in school. He showed no signs of long-term depression or suicidal ideation. And then there's the theory that Brian never left the building alive. Some speculate he may have accidentally fallen into a construction area, but every part of that building was thoroughly searched. Nothing was found. Others believe someone inside the bar harmed him and removed him later, after closing, when cameras were off. But there are no witnesses. No reports of a fight. No signs of blood. No suspicious activity. Years passed. The case grew colder. Brian's family suffered. Tragedy struck again when his mother's death was followed by another loss. His father, Randy, died in 2008. But something eerie happened after Randy's obituary was posted online. A comment appeared from an anonymous user saying Brian was alive. The message said, "Dad, I love you. I'm still alive." Investigators traced the IP address. It came from a random public computer. It was a cruel hoax. Another dead end. Alexis, who waited for Brian for years, kept calling his number every night. Sometimes the phone rang before going to voicemail, giving her hope, but phone providers explained that this sometimes happens due to network glitches. No real connection, just a technical illusion. To this day, Brian's phone, keys, wallet, ID, everything, remain missing. His disappearance remains one of the purest mysteries in modern true crime. No suspects, no evidence, no motive, no confirmed sightings. A young man walked into a bar, smiled at the camera, and vanished into air. How does that happen? Theories continue to grow. Some believe he was abducted. Others think he ran away to start a new life in secrecy. Some think the bar's camera system had blind spots, allowing Brian to slip out unnoticed. And more dramatic theories suggest organized crime or a targeted attack. But without evidence, everything remains speculation. What we do know is this: someone, somewhere, has the answer. Someone knows what happened in those missing minutes after Brian stepped out of the camera's view. Someone knows whether he left the bar willingly, fearfully, or not at all. The city of Columbus still remembers Brian. His poster still circulates online. His disappearance still haunts investigators. And every year, thousands of people revisit the camera footage, hoping to catch something the police might have missed. But the truth, whatever it is, remains locked behind that moment on camera. When Brian smiles, speaks briefly, and steps out of frame. A moment that has become a doorway to a mystery with no exit. Maybe he walked into trouble. Maybe he escaped his pain. Maybe someone planned something. Or maybe the answer is something no one has considered. Until the day new evidence emerges, one thing remains certain: Brian Shaffer walked into a bar on March 31, 2006. And the world has been waiting ever since for him to come back out.